my baseball coach in college, who I talk about a lot on the podcast, used to always say that every great coach should actually be a basketball coach. Because basketball coaches, for the longest time, there's not an offensive coordinator, there's not a defensive coordinator. Basketball coaches are hands-on coaches. They get out there, they communicate with the player, they work with them, and everybody has a different role. And the basketball teams I've worked with, whether the NBA or college, one coach may break down a certain defense or a certain offense to match. But talk to me about what you see about the best coaches in basketball and what they communicate to the players that makes them special.
Man, what a great question to get us going with. So in a lot of the work, and I'm going to kind of relate this to how we do it on a short term scale. So a lot of the work that we do with our athletes when we have them at our combine is they get to interview with teams, they get to be around teams, they get exposure from teams, and essentially they're doing their biggest tryout of their life for the NBA. And there are a few things that we see around what makes a player excited to be with a coach, right? And so when you look at that, what we find is being coachable and being able to implement the feedback they're given in a quick and short time manner is really, really key for when people are evaluating, making decisions. Secondly, is being able to ask great questions. And I think when players are able to ask great questions, and I'm going to relate this into the coaching side of things in just a second, when players are able to ask great questions, it allows the coach to realize that they're serious about what they want to do, right? So now let's flip it over to the coach side of things, right? A great coach, when it looks at this, is giving the player an opportunity to know that they're actually there for them, right? One of the coaches that worked with us, and now he's an assistant at Boise State, his biggest thing is making sure his players know he's genuinely there and would genuinely support them and wants them to take these chances and not play in fear of being taken out right away or being in fear of what could go wrong, but rather play in the excitement of what could go right. And so when I think about a lot of basketball coaches, whether it be at the youth level or at the highest level, is really being able to develop the trust of the player and being able to have the player believe that they have the permission to be their best self on and off the court.
So it's interesting because one of the things that you see with basketball players is they're really connected to the minutes approach. How many minutes am I getting? And they miss sometimes the role. And I guess that comes down to the coach, right? To being able to explain to them, and that connection that you're talking about is like, look, I need you to be this versus having like a ambiguous recommendation. I mean, is that kind of what you're talking about?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, as you look into basketball right now, especially more than ever, right? We're seeing the development of role players getting even max contracts in the NBA, right? We're seeing role players really be able to make a name for themselves. When you look at The Last Dance, the Michael Jordan doc, right? And you hear Steve Kerr talk and you hear some of these players talk about their role, Dennis Rodman, you notice that the role plays such a big part of the team's overall success. Now, what I find, especially with the young guys, is it's hard for them to accept the role because it's a lot of new money, it's a lot of fame, It's a lot of opportunity. And so when you look at it that way, it makes it very hard. And so when a coach is able to communicate effectively, which all comes down to communication, right?
Yeah.
It all comes down to communication, expectation, and creating the environment. You're able to build out players in that role and enable them to thrive, which still enables them to achieve whatever their individual goals are, but for the greater goal of the team. And I think that's a huge difference right there.
How did basketball shift? If you look at the generational shift that happened in basketball, I mean, we go back, and I'm not one of these old guys. I'm not doing this to say this, but it is a very unique thing that happened. I mean, I'm 48, so I remember when I was younger, it was the Larry Bird, the Magic Johnsons, the Michael Jordans. It was teams and dynasties and franchises that moved like Major League Baseball, a little bit like football, where it moved, but it's much more of a free agent. You create your organization and your team approach, which in my mind, a little bit changed that dynamic of coaching, because the coaching was more about the recruiting and then maximizing the ones that want to be there versus developing talent in your organization, right?
Mm-hmm. And so yeah, go ahead.
No. So the question is, I mean, how much in the NBA, college with one and dones, how much is about developing talent?
Well, I think there are different approaches to this, right? And I think this is what makes it so interesting, right? When you look at the Kentuckys and the Dukes that have a lot of one and dones versus the other programs that are good every year, but it's a team every year, and they got guys that are going to be juniors.
St. Mary's or Gonzaga or something. Yeah.
Right. And you look at this and you start to question, well, which approach is the right approach? Well, I think it's based off the individual, right? And I think there are certain individuals that go to certain schools for certain reasons. And when you look at from an NBA perspective, I think we're looking at now who, more than ever, especially because even if a player signs a 5-year deal, they don't have to stay for 5 years anymore. They can say, I'm done, I want to leave. The media blows it up, and then they're going to another team the next week, right? And so I think a big thing when it comes to developing talent is really being able to identify, okay, being able to identify where do they fit, right? Going back to this role play, where do they fit in the system, right? And depending on that is going to dictate where it all will expand upon. So if we're talking about the college game, or even if you want to look at some of the NBA game, when you get a guy who's a rookie, right? The question becomes, well, is their goal to get to the NBA? If they're a college guy, is the goal to get to the NBA, or are they a one and done prospect? If they are, we have to develop the talent that's going to make them draftable, right? If they are a multiple type player, we may have a different process and go with the 2-year plan, 3-year plan. And I think coaches keep that in mind a lot of the times of where do they see this guy's role becoming and how do they see it impacting them while it helps the team. But again, a great coach will always make sure they take care of their players, right? And really help the players achieve whatever their next desire is. And so I think that there is a difference between how you develop talent in the college game versus the NBA game.
Sure. What's the risk for coaches in the NBA game? I mean, job tenure is huge. I mean, pro basketball has a very fluid coaching structure now. But what are the risks that you see in leading players? I mean, obviously not connecting to them, but what do you see?
We see, a bunch of different things, right? And when it comes to really being able to talk about the risk, I think it's important to think about, well, on the flip side, what is the risk of not developing this player? What is the risk of focusing on what we already have versus focusing on the new people coming in, right? And I think there are coaches out there that have a certain idea of the win now, and we're gonna run our big guys to the core, and the guys are just gonna only get better in practice. And then you have other coaches that have the philosophy of we're gonna let our young bucks, we're gonna let them go and run and see what they can do and figure it out as they go. And I think they're depending on the franchise that you're with, right? There's all these extra factors, but I think at the core of it, when it comes to what is the risk, is for a coach is really deciding, okay, what do I need to do to make sure that we put this franchise in the best light moving forward, right? And sometimes that is developing the young players more than keeping the older guys in, even if that comes at the cost of maybe a few losses, but greater long-term success for the franchise. And other people will say that it's all about focusing on, look, we have these older guys now, they only got a couple more years. We're going to use them to the best of their ability and just make sure that the leadership goes down, right? And I think we're also seeing as more and more, and this has always been something, but especially lately, when teams draft a potential franchise prospect, they're always finding a veteran that they can bring onto the team to mentor them in some capacity. And this is something that always has been going on, but I think now, especially in the last 5 years, we've seen that a ton, right? Like I look at Andre Iguodala. Pretty much wherever he's going is wherever they have a new person who he wants to mentor, right? Or if you look at some of these guys finishing their career, the teams that are bringing them into their organization is because there's somebody that they clearly want to mentor. And I think that that's something that's a really great move on the coach side of things and the franchise side of things, because it can really help these players develop their talent while also still compete. And at the end of the day, your job is to win games. Your job is to win championships, right? You want to win. And so there is that balance and that dance between how you finagle this depending on your personnel.
It's funny you say that because, the clubhouse guy that you see in baseball that moves around and you watch a manager and they're close and they'll bring somebody in. I always use the example of like Buck Showalter, who's managed multiple teams, always got them on the cusp of the World Series and would get fired. And then the next guy would come in and take them to the next step. Buck was a builder, but then there was a finisher that would come in. And I think I'm sure Buck would always want to do a finish, but, he built the Yankees and then Joe Torre came in. He built the Diamondbacks and Bob Brenly came in. He built the Rangers, then Ron Washington came in. It's a fascinating approach. One of the things that I see, and as people are listening to this as coaches, and whether business owners, it's the same thing, is how do you build those people in your organization that are your own, I don't want to say raving fan, but is really your program guy or girl, your culture keeper, your the bridge, the one that bridges the locker room and the administrative. I mean, how do you find that person? How do you develop that person?
Well, I think the first and foremost, the most important thing there is going to be our role of communication in this process, right? And when that comes to is setting a clear expectation, right? If
Mm-hmm.
you got a veteran coming in there thinking they're the veteran and they're going to play all this time, but your expectation of them is to be a mentor and a role player that's going to guide the younger guys, there's a divide there, right?
Yeah.
And so I think a big thing is being able to communicate effectively what's expected. Look at the Dwight Howard role last year.
Mm-hmm.
Dwight Howard had been known for having an attitude. He comes in to the Lakers, comes back to Lakers, and boom, he's playing some of his best basketball that he has in a long time. He learned his role. And part of that probably had to do with having LeBron and AD on his team, and LeBron being LeBron, right? LeBron was going to make sure that happened. But I think part of it then also goes into how do we develop the trust, right? How do, as a coach, we develop the trust? And part of that is by enabling our players, by enabling our people to be able to figure things out on their own while we guide them. Make them think it's their own idea while really it's our idea, right? And that's in business and anything. You want people to think it's their own idea. We want them to sell themselves on what it is. And so we need to create that buy-in through some of those different methods. And then thirdly is to if you want someone to bridge that gap, you need to treat them as they're a gap bridger, right? And I think just as if you expect them to do certain things, they should be able to expect things of you. And so whenever I talk to my players and we're doing our combine, right, I have 48 hours with these guys. I let them know very clear what the expectations are, what they need, and I let them know exactly if they're going to succeed, what they need to do with me on my end. If they want introductions, if they want connections, if they want me to support them and talk highly about them, then they need to invest in the process. They need to commit to it. They need to put in the extra work. And then when teams are asking me, hey, what do they like when they're not in front of me trying to impress me? Well, guess what? I'm the one that sees everything that they're doing around the hotel. I'm seeing what they're doing before they go on to the workouts. I'm able to relay that information. And of course, I want our guys to succeed. I'm always trying to frame it in a positive light. But at the same time, they come to me because I give honest answers. I'm straightforward. And I tell the players exactly that. And so I think it's about treating these players, especially when we're trying to build this culture with a specific player, is really about developing the expectation and communicating it on both ends, and letting them know that you're open to their feedback and that you're open to their ideas as well. Because when people feel heard, they are able to do more and they're willing to go to bat for you.
Who is your mentor in that situation for you?
So I've had a lot of mentors, but I think of my high school basketball coach as one of my big mentors when it comes to really understanding that philosophy. And then I also have a business mentor where this really came into play. But my high school basketball coach, he always would make sure that I knew what was expected of me, but he would always also push me to be better than that. And knowing that he believed in that, and knowing that he wasn't going to stop pushing me until I either couldn't handle it or until I wasn't going to listen, really allowed me to say, you know what, I'm going to continue to rise to this challenge. I'm going to bridge that gap for you and communicate with the players because I trust you. And I know that you have my best interest in heart, and therefore I expect you to have everyone else's best interest at heart. And so I was the guy that made sure I relayed the message. Because as we know, there are always going to be players in any sport that are going to have their egos, that are going to be doing their own thing. And when you can have somebody on the court who's a player that thinks the same way or has the same objective as the players and the coach in mind, you can really, as we talk about this, continue to bridge those gaps. So that was one of my big mentors that has really shown me when someone believes in you and listens to you and allows you to come at them as well and challenge them as well, that it becomes a place for growth rather than a place of resistance.
One of the hardest things doing, setting up my business 10 years ago was getting buy-in. And, I come from the baseball world. I came from playing, and as a psychologist, I was like, okay, these are the things that have to be done. And what I found was selection is really, really difficult. And for entrepreneurs, it's a lot like coaches. You're building a team and an organization. But the difference between a coach and an entrepreneur is the entrepreneur, many times their culture is them, like the live and die. And that was always the hardest thing for me is as a player or as a coach, I could say, well, this is how the organization does it. But when it's my company and my reputation is on the line, that just amplified it tenfold. Like it was
I'm
so
with you.
personal to me.
I'm with you. And I think, if there are teams that have that same buy-in, right? When you can get a team and organization to have that same level of buy-in that we as the entrepreneur have of our own business, and of course it's never going to be to the same exact level, right? Like that's never gonna happen. But when we can get players to buy into the greatest good, we can really make some magic happen. And like I know for me in my business, as an entrepreneur and as with the combine, I see two different things because there's different people involved. The mission is a little bit different, right? The involvement of my end is a little different. My responsibility is a little different. And it's always interesting to see what we're able to do and how we're able to have people believe in what it is. And it's not just that they're believing in your business, they're believing in creating something that changes the future of other people's lives. And so for me, that's kind of how I've interpreted that. But what you're saying is really true.
What do you, if you could lay out a plan for a coach, an entrepreneur, and I use those terms very interchangeably. I mean, what are the core factors that have to be there? Because a lot of people who listen to this podcast are coaches, and they're trying to figure out, okay, what's the best way? And they go into a program, they have all the right ideas, they have the right attention, and then it goes sideways on them, and it gets difficult. And you see in like the college or the pro game, coaches moving on. As we're recording this, Gus Malzahn at Auburn was let go a couple days ago. I mean, 8 years in the program, above average results. Who knows who they're going to hire? Is it going to be better? What are the core foundational elements that you see that are so critical for those people in those leadership positions, whether it's starting a business, starting a program, that have to be in place?
I call this the ACE method. And
Okay.
this is what I believe is a foundational piece for anybody to achieve success in any role. And the ACE method is, the first part of it is action. Okay. Taking positive and intentional action. Now, as an entrepreneur, this action looks like doing whatever it takes to get your shit rolling, right? It's
hmm
whatever it takes.
I always said I
Identify.
would lick concrete for revenue. Yes.
Yeah,
Yep.
exactly, right. And I think about this. My dad told me when I was writing my first book, he told me everybody wants a shortcut, but there is no shortcut. And I was like, okay. And then he said, what happened next was something that changed everything that I ever thought of. And he said, the only shortcut, Jake, really, the only shortcut in life is to start now. And if
hmm
we want to build a team, if we want to build a business, it has to start with setting the foundation and laying that foundation by our actions. That is where we initially get going. And when we take action, great things will happen. When we take action, even in face of adversity, that's when great things happen, right?
hmm
Whenever you look at it, right? Most people will keep knocking on the hammer, right? And then the nail, and then they give up right before it breaks through. And right on the other side is greatness, right? The C is connection, authentic connection. I believe connection is hands down the most foundational piece of any business or any
I
team.
agree.
Our ability to trust, our ability to believe, and our ability to grow together to believe in something that's greater than ourselves. When we talk with athletes and entrepreneurs, these people tend to be very high performers. Now, high performers tend to always think that they're doing everything with each other and creating great partnerships and doing it for other people. What I find though is a lot of people, when they actually dig deep and they don't want to admit it, they have what we call a me mentality. They have a me mentality versus a we mentality. And here's how I break this down. A we mentality focuses on what can we do for each other? How can we help each other get the results we know we both want?
hmm
A me mentality is what can you do for me? How can I use you to get to where I want to go? Coach, how can I use this player's incredible ability to get myself to the next level, right? An entrepreneur, how can I use this person to get access to the person I really want to get access to? Because we
Yeah.
know that door can be open. Here's where most people would say, look, I have a we mentality. But when you look at it, the person with the me mentality is when someone else has success and it's a direct competitor, or when it's someone right in the same level that's kind of going for that same job or whatever it may be. Instead of being like excited for them, they have that feeling of jealousy, that resentment, because it's about them and not about what other possibilities are there. They're closed. That's still when we have the me mentality. And it's hard. This is where it's
Yeah.
hard. This is where it's really hard because sure, you're a competitor, you want to win. And someone gets your job, you're pissed. I get that. But this is where we have to believe that we are going to go to where we need to be. And that's going to be the next opportunity. That's going to be the next connection. That's going to be the next person. That's going to be the next thing. And we've all had these experiences of people getting passed up, players getting passed up in the draft, and they end up getting this other player, and it becomes the right player for them. Or a coach, this coach got picked up by another team, a new coach got an opportunity they wouldn't have gotten otherwise, boom, that coach takes off, wins a championship. So connection, to me, is a foundational piece. And then the last part of the ACE method is enjoyment. And I have a real strong belief that in the pursuit of greatness, we must enjoy the journey. And what this really looks like is everybody has a unique definition of success for whatever their life is. And there are different buckets of success. But if we pursue that definition of success relentlessly, and we enjoy the process in that pursuit, we will achieve greatness. We will achieve greatness. When you're enjoying yourself, your team starts to enjoy themselves. When you start to enjoy yourself, they start to feed off that energy. There is so much more to enjoyment than just having fun for the sake of having fun. There is purpose and intentionality behind it. And when you combine positive intentional action, authentic connection, and life enjoyment, you can create a winning atmosphere, a winning culture, winning definition of success that enables you to achieve whatever it is that you need to achieve in that moment.
Who do you, in addition to the mentors, who do you read? Who do you study? What feeds your soul?
Oh man, I study all types of people. One of the areas that I really love diving into is habits and behavior. And so Atomic Habits by James Clear, Tiny Habits by BJ Fogg, The Power of Habit. I got
Charles
a couple over
Duhigg.
here on my bookshelf. Yep. There's a lot of great habit books out there, and I love breaking it down into simple decisions, right? Simple actions that over time create incredible results. I'm big on compounding growth. I'm big on 1% every day. So there's those guys that I really like in the area of habits. I also did a lot of research on positive psychology. And positive psychology for me, the Sean Acors of the world, and people like that, has really helped me understand how to be present so that I can make better decisions in order to get the results that I'm actually looking for. So that's been something that I really am fascinated by. And then depending on different areas of my business, I go laser focused on a specific area so that I can become a master of that area and really be able to implement right away. So there have been different people. Russell Brunson's an incredible marketing expert. There have been so many other people that I've looked to for guidance on specific areas. But I'm always consuming myself with new knowledge, depending on where I'm at and where I'm trying to go, and try to bridge that gap through education.
Where do you see the field of coaching, coaching in general, just coaching, in the next couple of years? Because one of the concerns I have is that, the high school coach is a little bit becoming an endangered species. AAU coaches are going to they have a lot more power. A player is more connected to their AAU coach than their high school coach. Their private development coach is going to be more, and even in college, by the time a kid gets to college, that player may have 8 or 9 points of input more outside the college coach. The college coach may be standing in line because they're more connected. So I think my thought is coaching is in a little bit of a crisis. And I just kind of wanted to know your thought on that.
It's interesting when you break it down, right? Because most people on the outside, it's like, oh, coaching's coaching, right? Like, and there's it'll always be there, okay?
Yeah.
But that's true, and this is where, if we want to talk about the high school coaches, I think this is where high school coaches, whether or not you're able to recruit or not able to recruit, this is where coaches have to do more than develop the player on the court.
Yeah.
They have to develop the player as the whole being. And if they don't, they're going to lose that player to go to all those other people. Instead, they need to buy into the team that the player already is surrounding themselves with. Because then,
and not be a resistor or a blocker.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If you're a coach and you're only focused, he's at my school, she's at my school, his player's at my school, I'm in control of them now. That's where coaching becomes an endangered species. But if you say, I'm going to embrace their AAU coach, okay, I'm going to embrace their family, their uncle, whoever it may be that's involved, their training coach, right? Like whoever it is, their skills trainer, whatever it may be. What you're doing is now you're allowing all those parties to now speak more highly of you to that player, giving you more trust with that player, enabling you to build that better culture, right? When you think about the college player, this is where when the recruiting process, the communication has to be even more in depth, right? Because we have to know where they're coming from. And we know that there's agents get involved at the college level. We know that there's so many outside
Come on,
people
that doesn't happen. That doesn't
coming
happen.
in. Yeah, right. Excuse me. It doesn't happen. Doesn't happen. And what we have to think about as coaches is how do we develop this player to achieve their goals while also making it a great opportunity for me and our team to win our championship or whatever it may be. And so as we talk about coaches being an endangered species, I think really it's about embracing the player, as the whole person, more so than just the sport that player is playing. And then also being able to bridge the gap between all the voices that get into the head of that player. And if you can do that, whether it's the player's own voice or whether it's their AAU coach, their family members, their Uncle Charlie from a different state who helped them grow up, whatever it may be, that I think is a pivotal part of being able to establish yourself as a go-to coach and retaining great players and developing those players into better results for your program and those players themselves.
Most underrated item on Taco Bell's menu.
Most underrated item on Taco Bell's menu, cheesy gordita crunch.
Why?
Because it's the best item on the menu.
See, I would have gone with the Mexican melt, beef Mexican melt.
Okay, not bad. Definitely not bad. But I got to say the cheese gordita crunch is underrated due to the fact that the Crunchwrap Supreme gets all the love. But the cheesy gordita crunch is one where once you have it, you'll never not order it again. That's all I got to say.
Okay, all right, I can dig it. You okay with the Mexican pizza going away?
Yeah, I'm fine with it. Look, here's the truth. I don't eat dairy anymore. So,
okay.
So I've had to adjust a variety of different things for my Taco Bell order. So the Mexican pizza, fine.
So what would you eat now? I mean,
I get the cheesy gordita crunch without the cheese, and then I have my own sauces that I've created to mock the cheesy gordita crunch. I mean, I'm an extreme Taco Bell guy. I was on a diet for like some stomach things, trying to figure out some things. I literally created my own in-house cheesy gordita crunch recipe with vegan cheese, vegan ranch dressing, the special Baja sauce. I had different lettuce. I did meat, no gluten on it. Like it was an intense process. Don't get me wrong, it wasn't nearly as good as Taco Bell because they are the master, but it was incredible to be able to replicate the item that got me through college.
So one of the things I always teach is that, you have to choose, do you want to be McDonald's or Chick-fil-A? McDonald's has been around forever. They rest on their laurels. You go into a McDonald's, their details are pretty crappy. They're always dirty. If you go into a clean McDonald's, you think, oh, health board just came. You don't look at a McDonald's and go, oh man, they're nailing it. You go to Chick-fil-A, the details are on. Taco Bell, could be a little bit of times where it could be a little, but they've had a nice little resurgence lately. I mean, what do you think?
Yes, yes. But what I think about Taco Bell is what they've done better than almost everybody is they know exactly who their customer is, and their marketing has been unbelievable. The way they've gotten involved with college sports, the way they've gotten involved with the NBA, with different organizations, that to me has been the resurgence. And so now they're right in there. They know exactly who they want to be. Their messaging is beautiful. They've adapted to social media better than any other fast food chain. Of course, I'm a little biased as it is my favorite fast food chain, but they have done an incredible job on all those layers. So it makes it easier for people to buy and support and overlook some of those McDonald's characteristics, right? Because now you associate the brand of social media and what you're seeing with the messaging with what you expect in their actual delivery.
Yeah, there's literally a Taco Bell within about a quarter mile of my house. And they went into this subdivision, and it was so funny. It's a higher end subdivision outside of Birmingham, and people are like, "The hell are they putting in a?" Because if you ask the people, you say, well, "Do you go to?" Oh no, I don't go to Taco Bell. But then you look at the damn drive-through line; it is packed, and people are like, "It's the best Taco Bell I've ever had." And it's so funny how people are like, but after every game we played when I was at LSU, we ended up at Taco Bell because it was open till 2 a.m. And you might go there at 11:30, 12 o'clock, and you're eating your dinner at 11:30 or 12 o'clock at night because you played. And then the 2 a.m. crowd starts rolling and that's the funny thing, right?
Yeah.
Dude, thanks so much. I like my conversations to be kind of untethered, and I appreciate it. Any passing words to go before we get out for our coaches that are out there who are listening to this?
I think the biggest thing I think the biggest thing from a serious note would be to let your players know you care about them. Let your players know that you care about them, and when you develop that trust with them, they will do whatever they can for you in that standpoint, and you will have incredible success. So let your players know you care for them. Words matter, actions matter, body language matters, and enjoy yourself. Coaching is an incredible profession. It's awesome, no matter who you're coaching. It's a blessing, so enjoy it.
You got it. Thanks so much for your time, and let's keep getting better.
Absolutely. Appreciate you.